Hey guys, this is Will O'Connor. Welcome back to What's Not Sport. This episode doesn't have any video to it, it's just audio. I just thought I'd give you guys that heads up if you do watch it, but I know a lot of you just listen to it in the car or on a run or something like that, so it doesn't really impact it too much. But anyway, that's besides the point. That's just a heads up, a PSA, if you will. But welcome back to What's Not Sport. I'm your host, Will O'Connor. This is the seventh out of eight in the 8 and 80 challenge. So our seventh guest of eight guests. So we're really closing in on the end. I had a lot of fun with this interview, like I do with all of them. This one was really interesting because I was very fortunate to sit down with sports agent Steve Gillis. And now Steve, he has an accolade of athletes he manages, but he was also a sports journalist, as well as just a regular journalist. So it's really interesting and was really cool to hear his story, how he went through journalism, to where he got into sports management, to even having his own podcast, chiming in. It was pretty cool. So enjoy this chat that I had with Steve, and here it is.
All right, mate.
Welcome back to What's Not Sports. I am your host, Will O'Connor. We're here for another episode of Inside Story, and I am joined here by sports agent Steve Gillis. Welcome.
Hey, g'day, Will. Thanks very much for having me on the show, mate.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. You're our seventh guest on the 8 and 80 challenge, as I spoke to you briefly in the past about. So I'm very excited to have you on. It's going to be a very different perspective to just having athletes on.
Yeah, well, I'm far from an athlete, mate, so I should fit that cross section very good for you.
Um, so you're a sports manager now, but at the beginning of your career, you're a sports journalist. Can you tell me a bit about what was your interest in journalism?
Yeah, I sort of fell into journalism, Will, in my last year at school in 1980. I had a mate who was working at News Limited who was a journalist, and I used to read his articles and admire his work and used to think that it was a glamorous type of profession and showed some interest in it. And he invited me in one Saturday to have a look around the office. And the races were on the radio and the footy was on the TV, and everyone was dressed casually and having a lot of fun. And I thought, wow, this looks like a lot of fun. And then after he showed me around the office, he took me to the pub, which was 50 yards from the office, and there was a heap of journalists in there drinking beer. And I just said, oh, wow, this is for me. This is my life. I was 17 years of age. I said, I've got to get into this. How good. So that's where my interest began. I think I originally wanted to be a school teacher, but I sort of flummed my way into journalism. It went from there.
And you started off working at News Limited on pretty young, almost straight out after school. Can you tell me about your time there and everything about it, the environment, what you were doing, and how you went through the ranks?
Yeah, it was a very exciting place to work. So when I went in during the year with my friend who showed me around, I met a guy in there who took my details. Back then, there were no sort of mobile phones or electronics or anything really. Social media just didn't exist. So he took my details, and he when I finished my last HSC exam in November, I got a call that evening on the home phone at home, and he said to me, he recalled meeting me in May that year, and he wanted to know whether I was still interested in working there. And I told him, I said, yeah, I am. And he said, well, I've got a job here, and I need you to start tonight at midnight in the police radio room. I'll give you a job as a copy boy. And I told him, I said, mate, I'm off to schoolies tomorrow. I'm away for 2 weeks, but when I get back, I'd love to come in. And he said, well, it's a take it or leave it. He said, I've got a list as long as your arm of people like you who want to get a foot in the door here. And he said, if you don't want it, I'll just ring the next person. And I said, I'll see you at midnight. So I cancelled schoolies and went into work at midnight that night and worked till 7 in the morning the next morning monitoring police radios. But one thing he said to me at the time was, mate, when your results come out in January, if you haven't got good passes in English and maths, I'm going to have to let you go. And I told him I did really well in the HSC and it wouldn't be a problem. But unfortunately, when my results came out, I failed everything in the HSC. I failed. Back then, it was out of 500. I got 200 out of 500. I failed religion. My best subject was geology, the study of rocks. I got 43 out of 100 for that, and also had the chance to have the papers remarked. Sometimes they could give you an opportunity to have your papers remarked, but I knocked it back. I didn't need the extra 2 or 3 marks they might have given me. So I went in there in the deep end, mate. And in January, he asked me to bring my results in, and I told him I'd done so well that the family were looking at them, and we're all very excited. And then he asked me 2 days later, you need to bring your results in. We've got a deal. And I told him our family was still looking at them. Everyone was very excited. I'd done very well. And then he said to me, if they're not here on Monday morning, I'm going to sack you. So all weekend I was trying to cut out numbers and forge the HSC papers that I was going to show him with passes in English and maths. And I couldn't do it because I was sticking numbers on. They were falling off the page and they were different sizes to the numbers that were already on there. So I went in there to fess up on the Monday morning to let him know that, I'm sorry and I'd let him down and I deserved to be sacked. And I went into his office and he wasn't there. There was another bloke in there. And I said to this guy, I said, hey, Jeff, where's Ross? I need to see him this morning. I've arranged to meet him. And he said, oh, mate, he's off crook. He's got glandular fever. He won't be back for 4 months. And he said, what do you need to see him about? And I said, oh, nothing, mate. I'll just get back to work. So I walked back out onto the news desk and resumed work because Ross hadn't told Jeff I was to be sacked that day. So I got a reprieve for 4 months, mate. And when he came back 4 months later, he sat me down and asked for my results again. But because I'd been there for 6 months by then and I was reliable and punctual and worked hard, and I'd had 31 stories published in my first 6 months as a copy boy, which was a pretty good amount, rather unusual amount. So you could see I was a bit of a chaser and a go-getter. He said, oh, mate, you can stay on. He said, there's no guarantees. He said, I don't think you're ever going to make it. He said, but because you're not causing us any trouble, you're welcome to stay. So I did. And that's how I got into it, mate.
And I guess to have the ambition, not doing so well in your HSCs, but to really put it in, how did you put it into practice as a journalist going, well, did you care much about school? What was it? And then what was it about journalism that made you want to work hard for it?
Yeah, I was actually pretty good at school, but I was easily distracted because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. In my last year at school, I was school captain. I also had a pretty serious knee injury when I was playing football for school. So for 2 months of the year, in my HSC year, I was on crutches and in having the leg rehab. So there was some. I guess I could make some excuses. In the trials, I did well. Year 10, 2 years early, I did exceptionally well. Had my first girlfriend in year 12. So there were a lot of things where my mind was wandering, not as focused as I was. But once I knew that I had to scramble and stand up for myself to fight for this opportunity to become a journalist, I guess I switched on. So I was, apart from being punctual and diligent and that, I took a great interest in learning from the journalists at the time, watching how they operated, talking to them about tricks of the trade and all that sort of stuff. So I really devoted my time and energy into it, unlike I'd done, probably for a year or two previously. So I guess at the end of the day, my work ethic saved me. But having said that, my work ethic back then compared to what it became throughout my career was chalk and cheese.
Can you tell me a bit more about how long you spent at News Limited and how it came to an end?
Yeah, so I was at News Limited for 13 years, I think. 2 of those years, I got the lunches. I was the copy boy. So for 2 years, I was a shit kicker, basically, where you go and get the lunches and you'd run errands and you'd go around to the library in the building and get photos out, which were to be published in the paper, things like that. So whilst it wasn't it was a slightly demeaning job because you're running errands for journalists, many of them who were rude to you at the time. It was also an opportunity to learn so much about the industry. So if you had your antenna up and you were looking and learning and listening and watching, it was a great grounding to get into journalism. So eventually, they'd have exams where you would sit for an exam, and the top four cadet copy boys, and about 80 of us, the copy boys and girls at the time, the top four would secure a cadetship, and eventually, after a period of time, I managed to forge my way into that top group and secure a cadetship. So when I first got my cadetship, I worked at state parliament. I worked in courts. I did police rounds. I did finance, sport, general duties, all that sort of stuff. So I was trained for another 2.5, 3 years in journalism. So you do a 3 or 4 month stint in each area. And then when you completed your cadetship, if there was a vacancy in the specific area that you chose to work, you could apply for that position. So I always liked sport. During my time as a copy boy and a cadet, I had numerous sports stories published. And as I was edging towards the end of my cadetship, I obviously connected with the sports editor and the sports team and requested that I join them. So I did as a full-time rugby league writer. It was probably around 1984 or 85 when I started there. So my job was to cover the games, talk to the players, talk to the coaches, go to the dressing rooms after the games, and report on rugby league, which was a passion of mine. I've grown up playing and following the game, and then to be able to, work alongside many people who were my heroes as a kid was a fantastic thrill.
And as a time as a journalist, what was your favorite bit about it? Was it the write-ups you got to do, or was it the player interviews, being in those locker rooms? What was it? What
Yeah.
was your favorite part?
But it was just every day was exciting. So every day you walked into that building was exciting. It was a vibrant place to work. There were some incredible characters who worked there. Every day was different. Um, some of when I was working on police rounds, I covered a huge story, the Spitbridge siege, where a guy had robbed a bank in town and took hostages in a car, and that driving from the city to the North Shore and back, and eventually the police put the Spit Bridge up, and then blocked off the road at the top. So he was caught between the bridge and the top of the road, and then the police moved in and shot him. And I was there, so things like that were, I shouldn't say exciting, but certainly an adrenaline rush at times working in police rounds. Covered numerous murders and all those sorts of things. And I don't want to make light of crime, but it was a vibrant, exciting type of place to work because it was every day was so different.
So you like the thrill of it all, whether it was police reporting or sports or whatever you did.
Yeah, I think I just think interacting with people and reporting the facts, and at times you felt you were contributing to society, I guess, as a journalist, a job to do. So I guess it was fulfilling at times when you'd break a story or write something that might change something for the betterment of your community or whatever. So there's plenty of positives. There's plenty of good things to come out of journalism. But at the same time, it's changed an incredible deal, in the last 10 or 15 years, and I don't think it's completely different today to what it was when I did it.
Yeah. Can you tell me a little bit about, well, what do you mean by it's different from when you were a journalist?
Oh, just with social media, and so a lot of articles now are driven by clickbait. So they can measure how many people click on a story. If you're on a website or whatever, and to get people clicking, they inflame, headlines and things like that. So, for example, Zach Lomax the other day, the headline read something like Lomax's career twist, new sport pursuing, and he had a game of fourth grade cricket, down at Shell Harbour.
Mm.
But to find out what he was doing, he had to click on it to find out he'd had a game of fourth grade cricket, of which, for the record, he has no intention of pursuing cricket as a career. But that's an example of fake news or fake journalism. I mean, that's designed to get people, to look over the fence, and say what's going on here. But it's not. It's not factual, and
Mm.
that's a big way in which journalism's changed. Back in the old days, your editor would have thrown that back at you. So
Mm.
go and get me a real story, you know.
Does that annoy you a little bit, seeing all the clickbait?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, as a former journalist, it does, mate. But the current day journalists will tell you that's the way of the world. That's how it works. That's what we've got to do. But yeah, and as I said, mate, I've worked for editors who would have, kicked you out of the office if
Mm.
you dished up something like that in the old
Yeah.
days. It might make a paragraph in a gossip column somewhere saying, spotted
Mm.
playing cricket on the weekend, but to run a feature article, um, suggesting that a guy was headed for career change on the back of a fourth grade game of cricket in Shell Harbour is frustrating to
Mm.
some,
Yeah.
like me. Mm.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I saw that article and I was wondering why they're even writing about it.
Yeah, yeah. But well, the reason they're writing, mate, is because they get traction with it. You
Mm.
know.
Yeah. Now, could you tell me about your switch from journalism into sports management?
Yeah, well, it came about. I'd applied for an upgrade, which was like a review. Each year, your grading as a journalist could be reviewed, and I'd applied for a review as I felt I was worthy of more money. So if successful, you get an upgrade. So journalism used to be like cadetship, um, D grade, B grade, C grade, and A grade journalist was like the top. I think you could be an A plus or something like that. And your wages were determined by what grade you were. So I applied for an upgrade, and I got knocked back. So I said to my boss at the time, I said, I'm owed 9 weeks holidays. I want to take them. And he said, you can't take them, mate. We need you. We can't spare you. And I said, well, you can't spare me, but you can't upgrade me. I said, I just said off the cuff, I said, I think I'll quit. And he said, off you go. And I said, what? He said, off you go. There's the door. See you later. My very first negotiation, I failed. It was a wipeout. And he said, off you go. I said, all right, I'm going. I'm quitting. And I walked out the door. I didn't have a plan or a job. All I wanted was a little bit more money. So that's how I left News. I mean, a week later, I had a job at Rugby League Week, um, and I went. I think I went from a C grade or a C grade to an A grade overnight. They offered me a real
Wow.
good deal, and I wasn't my own boss, but I was a senior reporter, so I was allowed to. I went from being in a chain of command to the editor saying, mate, what ideas have you got today, and what would you like to do, and what are you thinking of chasing? And it was a real different environment for me because I felt respected, and I could challenge myself because I knew I had to step up because I was getting paid more money, and so I went over there, and I really enjoyed working there. I was there for about 9 months, I think, when I got a phone call from a random bloke, young rugby league player. And his name was Keith Blackett. He was from Bathurst. And he rang me out of the blue and said that Parramatta wanted to talk to him about a contract, and he was looking for a manager. And he asked me to manage him. And then I'd never met him or spoken to him before. He just rang me. And I told him I couldn't manage him. So I gave him the names of 3 agents that I knew. So back then, there was probably about 5 agents in the game. And today, I think there's about 150 odd agents in the game. So the 3 agents who I gave him their details, he rang me again the next morning and said, "Oh, mate," he said, "I've got a meeting today with Parramatta. None of those blokes want to help me. They don't know who I am, and they weren't interested." He said, "I need you to manage me." And I told him I couldn't because it'd be a conflict of interest. So I couldn't manage a footballer and write stories about how wonderful they were. And then he started screaming at me and said, "Mate, my career's on the line here. My life's on the line. No one's helping me. I need you to manage me." So I said to him I'd come out with him to the meeting at Parramatta, which I did that day at midday. Met him for the first time at the train station, went to the football office. And when I met the Eels that day, obviously they knew who I was because I've been covering league for quite a period of time, but they began laughing at why I was there and, you know, why I was considering management and all those sort of things. And I thought this is going to be a disaster, but they gave me some time and I sat down and spoke to them and we left and eventually did a contract for Keith. But I went back to the office that day at League Week and went into the editor's office and I told him that I'd snuck out at lunchtime and been to Parramatta, the football club. And he said, "Oh, that's great." He said, I want you to go out and visit these clubs. It's good. It's a good way of, you know, building contacts and getting stories. But I told him I'd done it off my own bat and my own interest because I was going to help this young footballer. I was going to be his manager. And he asked me how many I had, how many players I had. And I said, "None." I said, "This bloke rang yesterday and asked me to manage him and I did it for him today." And I said, "I've got to resign, you know." And I was hoping he'd say, "Oh, mate, you know, stick around or we'll work something out or whatever." And he said, "Off you go." So within 12 months, I'd been tapped twice, once at New Zealand, once at League Week. And he said, "Mate, if that's what you want to do," he said, you do it, mate." He said, "I think you'll do well." So I left that day and I went home that night. I still remember I was home that night. And I was living on my own at the time, and I sat on the couch and I started crying. I said, "What have you done, you imbecile?" I'd gone, I finally become an A-grade journalist. I was working 2UE at the time, doing round the grounds with the continuous call team. So I was moonlighting on weekends for them, either on a Saturday or a Sunday. So I was earning really good money. And the moment that I quit, I had no income, nothing. And I thought, what the hell are you going to do now? We're in a bit of trouble. So it was a real turning point in my career because I knew then I had to really muscle up and get my bike and get going. I wasn't going to put food on the table.
Hmm. Could you now tell me a bit about the start of the journey as a sports manager and how you started to get more players and not just from NRL, you've had athletes across from different sports. Can you tell me all about that?
Yeah. Well, I knew I needed clients, but I didn't know how to get them. I didn't know that, you know, I didn't know that there were junior league carnivals you could go to scout and recruit. So, but I knew I needed clients. So I contacted the great Phil Buzz Rothfield, who worked with me at the Telegraph when I was there a year or so earlier. And I rang him the day after I quit at League Week, and I said to him, I said, "Phil, I've quit." He said, "Yeah, I know, I've heard." And this was the morning after. And I said, how have you heard? And obviously everyone at League Week knew everyone at News, and the story was spreading like wildfire that I'd walked away on the back of this kid, Keith Blackett. And I said, "Mate, I need a favour. I need you to put something in the paper for me that I've quit journalism, I'm going to manage players," because I knew that if I get an article in his column, "What's the Buzz," which was widely read, the players would know that I was doing this, and hopefully that the players that I've built relationships with over many years might say, I'll go with him, I'll give him a try. Because a lot of them didn't have agents back then. So I asked Phil if he'd put an art, and Phil said, yeah, I'll look after you, mate. Leave it with me. So the following Sunday, I picked up the paper, hoping that, Phil was going to herald me as the next big thing. And he'd written 2 paragraphs of something which said, Steve Gillis is quitting journalism, take up sports management, and his first client is Keith Blackett from Bathurst. And that was it. Yeah.
Mm.
And the phone started ringing, but 99 out of 100 calls were people gigging me saying, what have you done, you imbecile? And who's Keith Blackett? And you're kidding, aren't you? And, they just absolutely gave it to me. And I thought to myself, what am I going to do? So a week had gone by, had no other clients, had no idea what I was doing, had no income. Anyway, I was at North Sydney Oval the following Saturday watching the Bears play Canberra. And after the game, went over to the pub at Percy's, and the Canberra players started to filter in to the pub, and I was there just having a beer. And Laurie Daly, who I knew, came up to me and he said, "G'day, mate, how you going?" I said, "Good, Loz." He said, "How's Keith Blackett going?" Because he'd read the article. And I said, "Oh, Laurie, I don't want to talk about it, mate." I said, I've copped a pizzling this week from Keith Blackett jokes, and I don't want to talk about it. And he said to me, "Well, listen, mate, I don't have an agent. Would you like to manage me?" And I said, "Laurie, I've had 100 Keith Blackett jokes this week. I can't take any more. I just can't take it." And he said, "Mate, I don't have an agent." And he said, "If you'd like to do it, I'd love to give you a go." So I rang my friend Phil Rothfield at Telegraph instantly. And I said, "Phil, I've just got my second client." This was a week after he'd given me a spray in the paper. I said, Can you do me an article tomorrow?" He said, "Of course I can, mate." He said, "What's his name?" I said, "Oh, it's Laurie. I said, "I'll put him on." So Laurie grabbed the phone. He said, "G'day, Buzz." He said, "Who's that?" He said, "It's Laurie Daly." He said, "What are you doing, Laurie?" He said, "I'm going to join Steve's management team." Now, I grabbed the phone off Laurie. I said, "Phil, put that in your paper, mate." And I hung up. So that night, I thought it'd be page one news, because in 1994, Laurie was the best player in the world, And I just secured him a week after starting off the back of Keithy Blackett random phone call. So I thought, this is page one. So I get to, I didn't sleep that night. I get to the news agent first light the next morning to buy the paper, thinking I'm going to be page one. And after this becomes public, everyone's going to ring me and want me to manage him. And not page one, not page 2 or 3. I get to sport, to Rockfield's column, and there, same size article as the week before. It said, "The world's best rugby league player, Laurie Daly, has joined Steve Gillis's new sports management team as his number 2 client behind the great Keith Blackett from Bathurst." That's what he wrote.
Wow.
Anyway, despite his cheekiness, it still did the job, and the phone started ringing. So I reckon within 3 months, I'd signed about 30 NRL players and, superstars, like high-profile NRL players. And then about 8 months later, Super League happened. So I was very fortunate. I was in the right place at the right time, and by taking a chance, I was very, very lucky. But some people say you make your own luck. And if I didn't have the courage to tell the original bloke I was going to leave because he wouldn't give me the holidays, and I didn't have the courage to go and visit this bloke out of Parramatta who I'd never spoken to, I didn't know, then I probably wouldn't be where I am today. I don't know what I'd be doing. I'd probably be an old sub-editor somewhere at the newspaper, going through the grind. rather than having enjoyed this crazy journey that I've been on for the last 30 years.
Mm. Could you tell me a little bit about what it was like managing so many NRL players at once, and then with the introduction of the Super League?
Yeah, it was crazy times. I enjoyed managing the players, and obviously at the beginning of my journey, I was very green, very wet behind the ears, didn't have the skill set when I was starting out. I think I was about to my late 20s, I think. Um, so I didn't have the skill set to problem solve or manage some of the challenges as well as I obviously can today. So, today in management, there's nothing I haven't seen. I've had players go to rehab, I've had players go to jail, I've had players, um, you know, constantly in conflict with the law. I've had uh, marriage breakups. I've managed players that have taken their lives. All this sort of stuff. So I guess experience doesn't so much harden you, but it teaches you so many lessons, and you become a bit of a first responder. So if there's a drama and a player's in trouble for whatever reason, you know instantly how to manage that situation. There's not a situation I don't think that I couldn't um, problem solve or manage. At the same time, there's so many great stories. There's helping a player buy his first home, or going to weddings, or you know, um, celebrating book launches for them, books that they've written, and being part of their journey, and premierships and state of origins, and their first test jumper and their debut jumper, and being them with them on that journey. So whilst there's always going to be challenges, the highs greatly outweigh the lows, and to be able to contribute to the journey far outweighs the obstacles that you hit along the way.
Did that impact you, well, your mental health or anything in a negative way, or how did you deal with that, like on
Yeah,
yourself?
but it can. There have been times where I've been gassed. Absolutely. Um, Juiced. If you get one or two or three major um, um, problems at the same time, it can have an effect, mate. I'm sort of lucky that I've always had this mentality to be able to keep going. I don't know, whether I was taught as a kid or whatever, but I've always been able to charge on. But I can understand. See, you've also got to separate it from your family life.
Yeah, you were just saying that you had to separate, I guess, your own life from work.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. No, it's oh, mate, you need your downtime. You need to be able to turn it off. I tell people the job's not 24/7, it's 25/8, but you need to be able to step away and get some clear air at times. Um, um, Otherwise, you won't survive.
Mm. Can you tell me a little bit about um, the agents that you manage outside of NRL?
The players or
Players, sorry. Yeah, yeah, players, sorry.
oh so we look after some rugby union players.
Mm.
The current Wallabies that are doing really well. Guys like Max Jorgensen and Angus Bell, who are Benny Donaldson. They're regular starters with the Wallabies. There's obviously some media people that I manage. Still manage Laurie Daly today. The great Daryl Broman. I've looked after him I think, for the best part of 25 years, I think, maybe 30 years. So I do all his contracts, media contracts, and a lot of his appearances and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of variety there. I've always enjoyed that part of it because it's different to the rigors of the rugby league, contracts and management.
And what is it like managing someone that is, I guess, a bit of a media personality or a presenter in the
Yeah.
sports media world compared to an athlete?
Oh, they're totally different. Um, it's probably less hands-on to the extent that, with a current player, you're constantly doing stuff for him, whether it be, checking in on him, if he's injured, or organising boots, or sponsorships, or reviewing contracts, or whatever. Whereas the media identities, it's a lot less stressful. It's more about securing them a good deal, and supporting them, and finding them some work to supplement their income. But they're totally different.
Yeah. And could you tell me about some of the players that you do manage right now? Like you manage well, just it's almost like a library of players. How many you do have? Like you got the likes of Adam Reynolds,
Yeah,
Ben Hunt, Josh Papali'i. Like, can you tell me about that?
yeah, yeah. So I worked with Clinton Schifosky, who used to play for the Canberra Raiders and played rugby as well. He went to rugby, oh, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago from Canberra. He played for the Queensland Reds and then played professionally overseas. So yeah, well, look, we've got players pretty much at all clubs. Obviously, very, very high-profile players. So, you mentioned a few: Cam Murray and at South, and Alex Johnson and Jai Gray and Sammy Walker, and lots and lots of um, young aspiring players. But they're all good people. We've got a motto where when we recruit, it's important that they're obviously outstanding athletes, but we're pretty big on character, and they're all really, really good people. Someone like Dane Gagai at the Knights is as good a person as you could ever hope to meet, and that makes the job so much easier, so much more enjoyable.
And I'm still guess I'm trying to wrap my head around it, but how do you guys just do it in this day and era with so many brands wanting to sponsor players, all these brand deals, media opportunities? How are you able to manage all of that across all those players that you do have?
Yeah, it's funny, mate, because look, obviously from a footwear or boot point of view, it's most NRL players, if not all, but certainly the vast majority can secure footwear deals. But there was an article the other day where the RLPA chief Clint Newton came out and questioned whether agents were doing enough in the third party world for their clients. And what a lot of people have this misconception about is that players are bombarded with offers, or there's all these wonderful opportunities out there for them, where there's actually not, because a lot of the um, companies out there are hesitant to engage with league players on the back of many of the misdemeanors that often occur. So they've made a judgment that this isn't the right fit for our brand. At the same time, someone like a Reece Walsh, or a Nathan Cleary, that they would have massive opportunity to explore because of their profile, and obviously to be able to attract sponsors now, a requirement is you've got to have good social media numbers. Reece Walsh, I don't know how many followers he's got, but it'd be over 500,000, I would think. Generally, 10,000 is considered a starting point, but I would suggest that for a player to be marketable, he has to be at pretty much around that state of origin level where he's a star of the game. That's not to say that, there's not opportunities for someone who's not at that level, but generally the brands want the big names and they want they want to invest in people that other people like and want to be around. So it's a funny sort of situation where I feel there's this misconception that every player has truckloads of sponsors. When you look at the individual himself, remember when Jonathan Thurston was playing? I mean, he had a boot sponsor, he had a car sponsor, he had a headgear sponsor. With a bit of luck, you might get a vitamin sponsor. But we don't see players promoting big banks or big corporations. And a lot of that big money goes in the top end of town, the top end of rugby league. And clubs have protected sponsors. So if a club has a particular sponsor, if they were to be sponsored by the Commonwealth Bank, then the player can't go and get sponsored by any other bank because it'll be in conflict with that protected sponsor. So there's always walls and obstacles to get over, and it's not as easy as one would think. And at the same time, mate, the player's primary job is to play footy. So if you've got a player who has all these wonderful sponsors and is not focused on his primary income, his primary job, what he's best at, they can lose their way a bit too. So you've got to be able to balance all of that.
Yeah. And from an agent's point of view, just in the world of rugby league, who do you think the next big ticket item is? Like you just mentioned Nathan Cleary at the moment, Reece Walsh, those names. Who do you reckon could be the next big thing?
Yeah, but mate, it depends on I'd have to think about it because you probably caught me on the hop, but it
Sorry.
depends on that they need to win things. They need to play it at the highest level. Origin, for example, which is played over a 6 or 7 week period, those guys are in the spotlight for 2 months of the year. If they go on to play in the final series and the grand final, they're in the spotlight for another 4 or 5 weeks. And when I talk about the spotlight, I mean constant media, page one, back page, TV stories. And that's how their profile can boom. Look, the next big thing, and it's Reece Walsh has got to be the potential to be the biggest thing we've ever seen in rugby league. He is absolutely looked upon as a rock star in Brisbane. So I don't know where the end is for him, but I would imagine that his profile is going to continue to grow. He can pick and choose who he wants to endorse. At the same time, mate, the rugby league players are really good at giving back. They probably don't get the credit that they deserve for things they do outside of footy, things they sign, school visits, hospital visits, talking to people in the street, being patient with people, on their own time when they're out having dinner and stuff like that. They're exceptionally good when it comes to giving back. And I know, obviously, overseas, sports fans, find it extremely difficult to get anywhere near their heroes. But in Australia, we're lucky that these guys have grown up and understand what it's like and have been well educated by their clubs and the game about how to engage with people and how to be kind to people.
Yeah. I don't know if I can ask you this, and I just kind of thought about it while we we're talking. But R360.
Warning.
Warning. Yeah, warning on it. Could you tell me your thoughts about it and I guess the NRL's 10-year ban if you as a manager or even as a player if you go into negotiations and join the comp.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts about it all?
Yeah. Oh, look, I don't want to say too much about it.
That's all right.
But look, Peter V'landys was protecting the game at the time, irrespective of whether or not the competition was going to commence. He took some action, which I would have done the same. The agents obviously have an obligation to represent their players, and if a player comes to us and says, "I want to go and play tennis," then we've got to go and explore tennis. If he comes to us and says, "I want to explore rugby," then we've got to go and explore rugby. We work for him. We don't work for the NRL. I think, there was an incredible amount of hype about R360. People were making out as if it was going to hijack rugby league. I'd get calls from journalists saying, "Are they going to hijack NRL Grand Final day?" And did I know what they had planned? And it was the greatest load of BS I've ever heard. Then we had stories about how the top 10 rugby players were next week going to unveil themselves to the world and announce they'd signed. And there was no direction. It was speculation from the get-go. It got an incredible amount of momentum in our media. And, well, not strangely, but the Australian media, in particular rugby league. I mean, R360, traction across the globe, across the planet, got nothing like it did in Australia, where everyone was fretting that 5 or 6 league players might go and play another code. It was hyped up to the hilt, to the point where we had some journalists saying, "I hope it doesn't start," which surprised me, because I don't know what, I don't know what would drive someone to say, I hope something doesn't start. I guess the journalists, in many ways, see rugby league as their lifeblood and feel that connected to the game and refer it to as our game, which is fine. But I don't know why a journalist would be death riding a potential new competition for whatever reason. I just couldn't work it out.
Yeah, a very interesting perspective on it all. Now, to finish up, I just want to talk a little bit before we end the podcast, a little bit about, I guess, your podcast, Chiming In. Could you tell me about that avenue you went down this year?
Yeah, mate, I did it as a favour for a mate who just reached out and was looking for someone to do some content for him. And I suggested some names of some guys that I thought might be suitable. He was actually after an ex-coach who could, dissect the game with some authority. And I sent him an email of some names that I thought might be appropriate. It might be good for him to explore. And I mentioned at the bottom of the email by chance, I said, podcasting is something that, might be of interest to me one day. My son's often said I should explore it. And he rang me up. He said, "I want you to do it." And I said, "Mate, I don't want to do a podcast. That's not the point of the email. I was just trying to help you." And he said, "I want you to do it." So I jumped on this year. It's called Chiming In. It's on a YouTube station, Fanatics TV. It's on Spotify, I think. I think I did 33 episodes. And whilst I found it enjoyable, it time-wise, I just didn't have the time to really commit to it. And as you know, mate, you got to do some prep.
Yeah.
And you got to find your guests. And you want the product to be good, not cringeworthy, So I jumped in there. I'm not sure if I'll continue next year. I haven't made a decision yet, but mate, it's good. We told some great stories and interviewed some really interesting people, and a lot of people seem to enjoy it. So I'll have to make a decision sometime in the new year about whether or not we keep going. But it's been fun. But I'm very lucky, mate, that I either know or have met or had something to do with all my guests. That's not to say I wouldn't interview someone I didn't know, but it makes it easier because I've been around so long that I have some kind of affiliation with the people that I chat to.
And did you enjoy being able to share people's story and your own on it?
Yeah, I think that's the main thing, mate. Just sharing stories, and there's some really good stuff there where people open up about lots of things. I mean, I think when I first started, I thought, being an ex-journalist, thinking, I've got to not get a headline, but I've got to get something big or new or fresh or eye-catching out of this. But I learned really quick, it's not about that, mate. If people want to share something with you, they will. So it's just about having a yak and sharing experiences rather than being shock horror. You got to tell us, how you got over your drug problem, or you got over your pokey playing problem, or how you were homeless but came back and all that sort of stuff. But whilst they're interesting factors, you don't have to bleed those factors out of the story to get a good podcast. It's more about having a yak, generally hearing something that you haven't heard before, which makes it interesting, but getting a real insight to the guest and understanding them better.
You were telling about sharing, not quite going for the hook on forcing a hook.
Yeah, I think just letting the people are the storytellers. I don't know if they need to be poked or prodded at all. I think if they're comfortable and having a yak, they're more likely to say something that we haven't heard before. I think if you line them up, it's like the fast bowler coming in with the opening delivery of the test match. This will be good. Here it comes. What's he want to know? He's going to ask me about this. I know he's going to ask me about this because it's been so much publicised in the past. So I'll give you an example. I might, if I do it next year, do a podcast with Jared Hayne, who I know reasonably well. My intention would not be to go over his much publicised journey in relation to the charges that were against him, but rather, talk more about where he's at today and what he's doing today. So I don't think you need to, tear it open and dissect it. And, while some people might comment after, oh, you didn't ask him about that, or didn't ask him about that. I think if those topics evolve throughout the discussion, that's great. But it's not always. It wouldn't be my intention to go in and say, mate, if you can come on, but I'm going to ask you about this, 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 and this, and it's going to be brutal, and I want you to, tell me everything. You won't get to first base with them. People have got to trust you, I think, if they're going to talk to you. Unless they go on for a specific reason to damage control the situation, which people may do, use a podcast to tell their side of the story, which is fine. But it's not my intention to tear guests apart. I don't think you get too far with that. I think if you've got the trust of the people, I think you'll get better guests. Because they'll say, go and listen to this one, go and listen to this one. This is the type of way we do our podcast. I think that's a great advertisement for where people will feel comfortable and put their trust in you.
Yeah. And it's much more enjoyable, I find, if it's more natural.
Yeah, I agree, mate. It's got to be natural. Yeah, you don't want to be sitting there thinking this guy's going to leap across the thing and punch me in the nose in a minute.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that's the purpose of the podcast. But mate, I'm only a rookie. I'm not an expert.
Me too.
I'm only a rookie. Yeah.
Well, Steve, I've had a great time chatting to you today.
I can't believe you're still awake.
No, it's been great. I find it so interesting, all the different stories from people, and that's why I love doing it, just learning about people and getting to share their stories. It's been really great talking to you. Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure, mate. You're doing a great job, and I hope it really grows for you in the direction that you'd like it to go, mate. And it's good that you can do this. And I guess at the end of the day, you're making people's lives a little more pleasant, if they're engaging with your pod, aren't you? You're giving to people.
Oh, I haven't looked at it like that before, so that's a
Hmm.
good outlook on it. Thank you very much.
Yeah. All right, mate. Go get them, Will.
Thank you very much. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that episode of What's Not Sports Inside Story with Steve Gillis at 7 out of 8 ticked for the 8 and 80 challenge. We're waiting. Well, get ready for episode 8 of 8, and that'll be a cool one. No spoils on who it is just yet. You're going to have to wait and find out. But coming to the end of the 8 and 80 journey, thank you guys for listening to another episode of What's Not Sports. So, cheers.